can you believe it's been 10 years since coverage was released in the App Store?
Oh my God. A decade in the App Store? It's hardly to even imagine that App Stores have been around 10 years, and yet we've been in, 10 years.
10
Crazy.
years with our coverage app. And we just had our newest release with a bunch of new features.
Staying on the path that I've chosen, straight up. Come my way and I'll see you at the top. 'Cause something's gonna happen in this story, and I can feel it coming like the rising of the sun. Straight
Long before we started the Mobile Internet Resource Center, which is now our day job, we were app developers. That was kind of one of our little side hustle projects, was developing mobile apps that solve problems in our own travels.
And the second app that we developed came about when we were going on a cross-country road trip heading to the iOS Dev Camp, which was a big gathering of iOS developers. And while we were camped in Colorado in the middle of this beautiful field of wildflowers, we got alerts on our phone that, Sprint was cutting us off for excessive roaming, even though we had great signal, great speeds. And then AT&T also cut us off for excessive roaming, despite great signal, great speeds. And it turns out we were actually in partner areas for each of those carriers.
And we didn't know it.
We were so ticked off because we had no way of knowing, no map that told us that we were in a roaming area.
Yes, because at the time, AT&T always showed that you were in AT&T coverage unless you had exceeded your roaming allowance. Then they would switch you to showing you're on a roaming partner. And we had just paid for 3 nights of camping at this beautiful Forest Service campground, and now we couldn't work remotely.
So
that actually prompted us to go buy a satellite dish. That's when we got a huge satellite dish on the way across country, because we got so annoyed with cellular at the time.
But then we get to this iOS Dev Camp, and we're brainstorming. We're supposed to come up with an app idea to prototype while you're at the Dev Camp with all these other developers, and we're like, what if we could solve the problem and build our own coverage maps that you can keep in your pocket, have on your phone, and it would show you if you were in a roaming area or if you were in a 3G area at the time or wherever else. And we cranked. We did several all-nighters, and by the end of the iOS Dev Camp, we had a working prototype running, and we actually won Most Useful App of the show.
And so that propelled us. We were actually, after getting to the iOS Dev Camp out in Silicon Valley, our next plan was we took an opportunity to sublet an apartment over in the U.S. Virgin Islands for the season. And once we moved over there, we hunkered down and focused on developing the app. And we released it December 22nd, 2010, 10 years ago.
And it was actually just in time. The app kind of hit the App Store just in time for the Verizon iPhone to come out. Verizon finally brought out an iPhone. This was way back when the iPhone was just AT&T only. And suddenly a lot of people wanted to know, well, how is my Verizon coverage going to compare to AT&T coverage? Should I switch carriers and all that? And the app actually turned into a hit. It was for a while.
For people choosing which iPhone to get or on which carrier. But we always intended it to help travelers like ourselves be able to scope out coverage in advance. Now, at this time, there weren't these great apps out there like RouteMetrics and OpenSignal that allowed you to do crowdsourced coverage maps and show actual signal at an area. So the maps have always been based on the carrier's claims. And we find it's useful to use both in our travels, knowing what the carrier is claiming and what people are actually experiencing. Because if you get out to a campground that no one has used one of these crowdsourced apps at, well, there's no data. It's just little snail trails, maybe around the major intersections around where the campground is, where you're actually staying. Yeah. So it helps to compare both. And of course, now we have great resources like campground review sites like Campendium, where you can also report what your coverage is like with the various carriers. So all of these resources together can help you better track your data. But LTE's gotten so good lately that you can almost show up someplace.
Yeah, so it's been a 10 years of, that's the downside of you release an app that requires constant updates, is you're updating it several times a year, many, many times a year, to keep track of the new apps and the new iOS versions. Then we rolled out an Android version and all this stuff. So it's been 10 years of evolution keeping this app up to date.
And it's never earned enough to really merit all of the costs, because originally we hand created those maps based on the carriers.
And they were so much work.
Oh, they were so much work. We actually almost shut down the app 4 or 5 years ago, just because it was becoming so labor intensive, and our day jobs with running the Mobile Internet Resource Center was consuming so much of our time. We just didn't have time anymore. We were lucky enough that Mosaic was a company that was also producing coverage maps, and they had their own little app out, but they weren't getting a lot of traction. So we reached out to them and asked, hey, you want to buy coverage and just use your take it over? And they're like, no, we don't want a new app.
They're like, actually, we're planning to shut down our app, but their day business is they sell maps to their consulting business that does their own map working. So they're like, but we will happily provide you maps, and they're like, you'll do the maps. That's the part we don't like doing. And they don't do an app anymore. So okay, it was great.
Perfect. They got purchased by Ookla a year or two ago. So now our apps are provided by Ookla. So they are high quality maps. We no longer have to create them ourselves. And we also partnered with a fellow full-time RVer, Rob of Hired Gun Software. We've been working with him for years on our prior apps. Also, we have U.S. Public Lands, which shows you public land boundaries in a similar vein of coverage. And we also have state lines, which tracks 50 state laws that change as you cross the line.
So yeah, Rob started off doing the Android versions of stuff, and then he took over the iOS versions, and so now we just kind of help, and we no longer have to be obsessed with keeping things up to date, and it has been great. But the app has continued to evolve, and this year is the biggest jump in the evolution of coverage since it came out. So what are the big changes for 2020?
Yeah, so first, earlier this year, we are now including U.S. Cellular. This came out in springtime. Now, they are the 5th largest carrier in the U.S. and definitely regional, but it's there. It's there.
Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint. Sprint's eventually going away as they get merged into T-Mobile, so we figured we got to add a 4th one. We got U.S. Cellular Maps.
Yes, and at present time, Sprint is still operating as an independent carrier, even though they are now owned by T-Mobile. Now, over the summer, we'd been planning this for a while. Ookla was able to give us Canada maps. We figured that might help people going up into Canada this summer, of course.
We had no idea the border would be closed.
Yeah. Well, timing. But anyway, now we have Bell, Rogers, and Telus maps built into the app. So this will help our Canadian friends as well. But once borders reopen, it'll help with traveling through up to Alaska, so you can better track your travels up there.
The Canada maps are a one-time unlock fee to unlock that feature. So.
And the biggest update that we are rolling out this month is 5G maps.
5G.
Yay, 5G maps. So this will turn off.
Because the maps had gotten boring because most of the big carriers had their LTE maps had basically finished filling in the country. It was no longer exciting to look where new coverage was appearing. But now, 5G, the race is on again, and we're now able to track the 5G coverage maps rolling out.
And 5G devices are coming out now, so now tracking 5G is important. So it's kind of cool. So now each of the carriers has both their longer range 5G, which is we're referring to as a nationwide. This is the 5G coverage that is going over their lower band frequencies. And then there's also the millimeter wave, which is where these little stars are. And these are the really, really short range bands and the ultra fast 5G speed. So there's 2 types of 5G. If you're not familiar with all this, head on over to our Mobile Internet Resource Center. We have a whole bunch of resources on 5G. We've been tracking this for years.
So now the app will be regularly updated to show where the 5G nationwide maps are expanding out, and there'll be stars tracking the cities that have millimeter wave. The mapping detail for millimeter wave is so fine-grained that we can't have maps of millimeter wave coverage, but we'll at least let you know the cities the carriers are claiming to cover, and now suddenly the app has got a lot more future ahead of it as we get to track this new race underway between the carriers.
So it is mind-blowing to me that we have an app, 3 apps now that are
10 years old.
Yeah, so both State Lines and Coverage came out in 2010, so that's 10 years in the App Store with 2 apps, and they're both still out there. Coverage State Lines is a smaller app.
Only gets 1 update a year. It's a lot easier.
Coverage, we have map updates that come out quarterly. We now offer an in-app subscription to get those at a higher resolution. That's how we are able to fund all of the effort that goes into this.
Yeah. Some people who bought the app for the original launch price of 99 cents have been getting 10 years of updates for that 99-cent purchase.
Yeah, that's a great deal.
Yeah, hell of a deal.
We're bad at business on that.
Marketing.
Definitely bad at business on that. And then U.S. Public Lands we released in 2014. So we came out with the idea for that once we found a public source of public land boundary maps that we could integrate in.
Yeah.
And so 10 years in the App Store, and I think launching Coverage
is what kind of was one of the dominoes that led to us starting the Mobile Internet Resource Center. And because we were providing resources and focusing so much on mobile internet that, well, it eventually became our day job, our everything, and all we do now.
Yeah. So if you're newer to our channel, maybe you didn't know that little bit of history about us and where we came from and what we've done in the past, but that's one of our apps, and mobile app development was one of our projects. We no longer develop mobile apps, so please don't ask us to. We are full-time consumed with running the Mobile Internet Resource Center these days.
Yeah, we used to help other people. No, not anymore. We're not going to do anybody else's apps. We're way out of that.
We do not even do the app development anymore ourselves. We now
hire that part out.
Well, we have a partner in that, and they split 50% of our proceeds. So anyway, that's a little look into our business life.
And thank you for helping us celebrate this major milestone, a 10th anniversary.
Yes. Wow. It's kind of cool. We've done a lot together.
We've done a lot together. It's been a long time. We've been wow. It's 10 years. Where will we be in 10 more years? Hollow phones with 3D coverage maps, maybe.
Yeah,
that goes straight in your brain.
Or we'll be on Mars. We'll have Mars coverage maps.
Yeah, we'll have Mars coverage maps.
There we go.
That's our next app. Actually, NASA has a contract for 5G on the moon. No, LTE on the moon. They're not even doing 5G. So maybe we'll do lunar coverage maps.
There we go.
Yes.
I'm sure there's at least one customer for that.
One customer. We'll have to charge a lot. Thanks.
We create these videos just for fun, and we love having you along for the ride. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, or if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. See you next time.